have a quorum,
All
Mr.
right,
Chair.
I'd like to call this meeting to
Don't
order.
talk anything, Frank.
You're all good, Frank?
Yeah, I
All right.
don't know what the hell's going on, but
Well,
All right,
that's
can
all
you
right.
see them? Because they can see you.
Okay,
Okay.
Yeah, I think we're good.
All right, hang up the phone.
Yep.
Okay,
Megan, just be just a little bit closer, please.
all right. I do not have the accessibility statement. Could you please read it or? Oh, hang on, I got too many things open on my screen.
Yep.
This meeting is accessible to people with disabilities. Microphones or telephones will be used by all speakers. Large print material are available upon request, advanced request. If you would like either of those accommodations, please contact Mary Waldron at 508-583-1833. The notice of non-discrimination rights and protections to the beneficiaries with regard to the federal Title VI non-discrimination protections and the state non-discrimination protections is posted in the meeting room and is available at the Old Colony. I lost my scope. It's back. Old Colony Planning Council website. Please contact Mary Waldron, same phone number for more information. Thank you. All right, and I'll let you, Mary, do the call. Roll call.
Mr. Chair, Lee Hartman,
Here.
Frank Staffier,
yes,
Stephen Santasonio,
Here.
and Becky Coletta.
Present.
And for the record, Mr. Chair, we have Megan Fournier and Charles Kilmer on for staff.
And Mary Waldron.
And Mary Waldron.
All right, have everybody had a chance to review the minutes? Do I have a motion?
I will make that motion.
seconded,
Motion is second. Has there any discussion on the minutes? Any amendments, changes? Okay, roll call vote. All in favor? Lee Hartman, yes. Frank,
yes,
Becky,
Yes.
and Steve?
Yes.
It's unanimous. Thank you. So next review item is any potential changes to the bylaw. Do you have my edits up? I had mine ready just in case.
Megan
I
does.
have everything combined between what you
Okay.
put. Mary, do you want me to put up the working document instead of the PDF?
Does it have all the,
Yep, it has everything on it.
please do, thank you.
Okay, 1 second.
So just for the committee, I took an opportunity to review the bylaw, and most of the stuff I found were just weird little things that still seem to hang out there. I'm not sure, Mary, you can go into some of the changes you have. And so we'll just go through this. Again, I think most of the ones I identified were more or less minor. So I saw this under the purpose where it said the organizational machinery. I thought mechanisms made a lot more sense than the word machinery. I thought the word equity should always show up somewhere in what we do. So the word, I put equity in there also. Among member governments on E, again, I think we want to look at a bigger picture than just member governance. So I added state agencies and the federal government. Federal government now, especially since we've been working with the EDA quite a bit. So again, I think those are pretty minor. Anyone else on that page?
Quick edit, take out A before continuing organizational mechanisms, because the machinery was singular and this is plural.
Okay, yep.
That's it.
Everybody okay with this?
yep,
And
The
what's this
thing
note
that,
here? But
yep, so this is staff, we talked about addressing inclusiveness, so being aligned with our DEI mission, which we haven't officially created one yet, but Mary, I don't know if you want to speak to that.
Well, and I think Lee had alluded to that under D where the equitable, but to really continue our stance in terms of being inclusive. Again, Megan and I actually, we had a little bit of debate. I said, no, we have included the DEI. She did go back to the notes. She went back to the meetings. We went back to the recordings. We, as the council has not formally adopted the DEI as a formal subcommittee, which it is one of the recommendations as we go further down in the bylaws. So I think that it further attests to, if we add, it's either there or if it's not in this J, then having the DEI be a formal subcommittee will show the strength of the intention of the organization.
So you don't have language yet, Mary?
Not, if not for Jay here, I
Okay.
did not, sorry, part of this
No,
was
no.
just
it's
before
okay.
part of this was just before I went on vacation. But perhaps if I could, Mr. Chair, if we can,
Well, if I could, so for the committee, I would have two suggestions or three. We could either just say, yes, we should include the language. We could say, include the language, but show it to us, and to avoid open meeting laws, just if any one of the committee members has a concern, to reach out to Mary. Or we could set it up and have it reviewed one more time. So I'd leave it to the three of you to decide. Unless Mary, you have something else, those I think would be the three options. So just leave it to staff to add the language, send it to us, leave it to, and then if there's a concern, I guess there's staff drafts it, sends it to us. If there's a concern, raise it with Mary and we revisit it, or we revisit it beforehand.
and my recommendation, Mr. Chair, would be if we can get to the DEI subcommittee section that talks about the language of establishing the DEI subcommittee. That may, then we come back to revisit this before we close out this meeting.
Any preference from the committee members?
I think
No.
what Mary's saying makes sense. Let's look at the DEI language and see if we can just pop it up here in
Okay.
some shortened way.
I'm putting this note in just in case we don't go back to it. So then that way, at least it's something that we can review. Okay. Moving on. Here we go.
So this again comes from me, and a lot of this is each town does this stuff all differently. And I think we as a council need to be as flexible as possible to make sure we have quality alternates and delegates. I can tell you that having to go through a formal vote by the selectmen in Plymouth, like it's could be, each town might be different. It might be the selectmen, might be the planning board, it could be the town manager, the town administrator, the mayor. So I just put this down to just simply say the town shall notify, the town shall certify in writing a person's designated as delegate, and leave it to the town to decide who that appointing authority is. I don't think we need to tell the town which group is the appointing authority, and the same for the alternate.
Didn't
So
we
that was
have
my
an issue
recommendation.
though, once we were looking at the charter at one point? And I thought we had some issue where the charter had some requirements as to how the town appoints. Do we have a separate charter document from the formation of the entity?
You know that, Megan, I know we have that in the SharePoint. So to Lee's comment is that, you know, we have, say, like the town of Easton that has Jean Marie Kent Joyce. She has not been reappointed, at least since I've been executive director, so 5 years. And then we have the town of Whitman that sends in on an annual basis their alternate and their delegate. And then, you know, it varies for the 17
Hey,
communities.
didn't you say one town has the planning board does the designation, not the select board?
That is correct.
So Becky, I would kind of say that right now we already are doing the changes I show, even if it's not consistent with the charter. Again, we don't necessarily have to do it, but I feel strongly that that flexibility will help us have better alternates and delegates if it's up to the town. I know for me personally, much easier to go through the town manager to get an alternate than it would be for me to go through all the hassles of having the select board do something formally through a formal session.
Megan, can I ask you a favor? Can you put a comment in this section just
Mhm.
to note Becky is just in terms of the charter? I do recall that we were to do that, but to the point that Lee raised, we're still waiting for a delegate or an alternate from the town of Plimpton, right? And I've asked and we don't hear. We can't, to Lee's point, we need to be flexible. It would be great to have some representation because we need, number one, the support, but certainly if we're gonna be doing projects in a community, it also shows the value of Old Colony Planning Council and the work that we do.
I mean, I will say I come from a town where I don't know if the select board will want me to continue. But I do think there is a value in bringing it to the select board in the sense that a lot of times the select boards don't know what Old Colony does. And they start to go off in different ways for maybe less so in a town like Plymouth Lee, but in other towns where they start to do projects without even realizing that this resource is there to provide consulting services or to maybe provide regional information that they don't know about.
And maybe there's a better way to attack that, which is having a better visibility of the council in general before the selectmen of each, other selectmen, or the mayor, so that they're aware that the OCP's out there.
Right.
Yeah, and I think
Yeah.
that's right. I think to some degree, much more now than before, but OCPC does operate a little underground from time to time, which isn't necessarily all the bad thing, but again, there's a lot of good going on, and I think some selectmen in various towns, including Plymouth, would be surprised to hear some of the things that go on.
Well, and sometimes I just think that towns duplicate efforts because they don't even know what OCPC has already done or pulled together
Yeah.
and could make things more efficient.
Yeah, and the focus of this one is more just for the appointment of the alternate and delegate, and give the town the flexibility to decide how they want to do it versus telling them how to do it.
I'm not opposed to this as long as it
Yeah.
fits, as long as we're not violating our charter, which I'm a
Yeah.
little concerned that,
We already are.
well, yes, so we never go back and look at the charter.
All right, well, so we'll look at that.
Yep.
All right, what do we have next? Oh, that was a question I had. So I just wanted to know this talk. So this is the general council, and I just don't remember oftentimes actually voting as a council member to accept a gift. I'm not opposed to it.
grant.
I'd
Right.
leave that to you as staff, but I'm not too sure we actually vote to formally accept gifts all the time.
You have not, and by way, at least not since even before I was here. But we do talk about funding through our financials with the receipts. But to your point, Lee, we do not put anything formally before the council to accept any of the grants. Part of that is a challenge of timing.
Yep.
Some of these grants have a quick turnover, so.
So maybe instead of accept, we use a wording such as
Report.
receive notification
Or
of contributions.
to review or something along those lines.
How about report? Because then that way,
Yeah, yeah.
that way.
Well,
it-
but we're not reporting.
No,
So it's
Oh,
to
to
accept
receive
reports or
report-
to receive
receive
reports.
got it.
You have the information, you have to report.
Yes, correct.
And
Sorry.
that way, that way we're not in a position where somebody decides to start arguing how you have your bylaw says you've got it. The council has to accept it and you've already done it. And again, I've been involved in a long time and I don't ever remember voting to accept something. So I
Right.
think receive report does it.
Mhm.
All right, where else are we going?
All right, Mary.
Yep, I will. This was only being proposed as a potential of, you know, the meeting says, we're at a minimum, we're supposed to be meeting, 4 times a year. But we meet monthly. And, again, there was just a potential of seeing if there's, we always have the executive committee that can always meet if something is of urgent matter. But this was just to bring forward the idea of potentially not meeting every month. And
Yeah, so maybe there's, the only thing I would say is who does that? So maybe you need to have by the president, some language in there, which could be varied from time to time by the president.
Well, it says upon call of its president or such other
Okay,
as a
okay,
council in the first
All right.
sentence.
okay, good. No, yeah.
I personally I know we have a lot of meetings, particularly for people who serve on subcommittees and JTC and SEDS and things like that. But I do find that over time, our meetings have actually gotten to do a lot more than review financials, and we spend a lot more time learning about what the council does and what sort of the issues of the year are. So I I tend to feel like the amount of time we meet is good with July, August, November off, and December being the summit month, and then we could the month we do the retreat, we don't have to have a meeting that month. I mean, I like the idea of it could vary from time to time, but personally, I kind of feel like we can the monthly except with I think it ends up being 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So it ends up being about 7 times a year that we actually have meetings.
Yep, Megan, I asked Megan to prepare a little document just to kind of bring it into a visual, what it could look like. Just, yeah, thanks, Megan. Just reduce that just a little bit. So January's right, the first of the year, the council, the finance, personnel, bylaw, all those subcommittees will meet in January to kind of flesh out, because each of them could be bylaw, we may need to, come back in July for some reason. February, we're thinking about the legislative breakfast. That's about the time, but that is just focused just on the legislative piece. March council meeting, again, the April, May, retreat, budget discussions, June's the annual meeting. So this would be just the picture with a little bit of a reduced schedule, but it's still a pretty robust schedule. One of the things that Becky and I talked about offline is that because we've changed our format where we're just not speaking at the council members, but we're bringing staff members and having highlights, and that came from a suggestion of like Allison, Shane from Duxbury, as well as from Alicia Siciliano from Pembroke, right? Knowing more about what we do to our council members is really helpful. And it kind of goes back to the conversation from earlier in the bylaw, like we need to internally, and we've had these discussions internally about, we need to promote what we do better. There's some communities that take full advantage of what we do, and there's some that don't. And, making that concerted effort that we go before the Board of Selectmen to present Old Colony Planning, not just through an annual, report to the town, but through a physical being at the meeting and talk about what we do. So
I would just ask Lee, like you're a planner and you've been on OCPC forever. Do you just find the meetings to be too much, or do you?
It's a tough question though for somebody who's out 2-3 nights a week. It's just one more meeting. Now, I had one last night. I have one tonight. If this is a OC, and I'm missing a lot of them now because this coincides with the planning board schedule right now for me. But it's hard for me to answer that question because I do whatever I can not to do night meetings. I want to stay married for my second marriage. But I don't find the meetings themselves when I can attend to be too long or too burdensome. But certainly every time there's a break, and you don't have one every month, that is a relief to me. Now, other people I know, meetings and night meetings and politics are their hobby and live for it, but that's not me.
Well, I was thinking like the newer members sometimes maybe get more out of our council meetings than people who've been on the committee council for a lot longer, right? Like Allison Shane is always interested to hear more about what the council's doing or can do because she's a relatively new member and she feels like Duxbury could use more support. So she's always looking to understand better.
Yeah, I think the topics over the years are always different, or if they're the same topic, it's with some new thing to it. So I've never gone and said, oh God, here we go again. Here's this presentation. Because even something as mundane as the 5-year tip, sorry, Charlie, no offense. But the tip is different every year, and it's important to kind of look at it. And for me, I focus on what's OCPC doing now, not for Plymouth again. But it's helpful, but it's always different. So although you see it,
Although the
the time.
Powder Point Bridge is for Plymouth.
Yeah, kind of, yeah. So again, I think I've never in my years with OCPC said, "Oh God, here we go." because every presentation, even if it's on the same topic, it's different every year.
Hmm.
What about you, Frank?
How about it?
What about-
I was thinking that, you know, we really only meet in what do we call it? I'm just trying to think of when we have our meeting. But maybe like on a Saturday during the summer, we should have a little get together as far as like a cookout. And I'm sure we could afford 2 dozen hot dogs or something like
Mm.
that. But I think it's very beneficial. And I'll tell you, like with John Costa, he's kind of disappointed that we don't meet at least twice a year. Now, we had that very nice time that I can't go to. Well, unfortunately, I'm restricted by doctor's appointments and to get together. But I think in like June or July, we ought to have a nice get together. You know, if you don't want to come, don't come. But I know, like, the selectmen, they're always asking me, gee, you guys got anything going? You have anything going? And I think the reason that we have lack of input from the selectmen is because they're not invited. And I think it's important that we get together maybe twice a year or once a year, plus what do we call that?
The summit?
The
The retreat?
summit.
Yeah.
Yeah. And you know, maybe we need to have a casual get together with shorts and sneakers, and we all sit down and have. I mean, you know, I'm not a great cook, but I'd help.
Mm.
And I just think it's a shame that we don't get together to see each other. And that's what makes it difficult.
Yeah. So I want to kind of just bring it back to the language before us, which is whether or not we say, which could vary from time to time. And whether we want that or some hybrid of that. But again, I think Mary's right. It does vary from time to time. So I'm okay with it.
I'm okay with the language because I think it allows that flexibility.
Yeah, and I
And
think, I'm
As I
sorry.
look at, as I look at Mary's schedule, it's probably not that far off.
Right.
And to Frank's point, you know, I hadn't really thought about it, but I
Right.
could have hosted a barbecue at my house kind of thing, to keep it less formal. When we met in person, people would sometimes go for pizza after meetings.
Right.
And now we get more participation with Zoom, but we don't get the monthly kind of informal conversations.
Yeah, and this is kind of beyond the bylaws, but I think you're right. And I think part of the challenge too, especially for someone at the very fringe of OCPC, it's an hour drive in and an hour drive out for me. So looking at different areas so that there is some other midway points for people. And Brockton's not the best place to be going at night at this point anyway, too, at times. So yeah, maybe that's as we look again beyond the bylaw, but Mary, you know, we talk about a couple of those types of things and put them in different parts of the region, so it might be a little more accessible.
Agreed. And so it is beyond the bylaws, but for sure I'm hearing what Frank is saying. Again, that camaraderie, right? I know that, you know, the group that was prior to my becoming executive director, I knew them, and because I participated, and you become not just members of a council, you become colleagues and friends. So we will look at something maybe to tie that in with the retreat idea. And to Frank's point about inviting select board members, they do get invited, town managers, planning board, board of selectmen, they all get invited to come to the summit. But I think the point would, let's try to find maybe another avenue. And the only other thing I would say about our meetings, we've really been trying to keep them to that hour.
Yeah.
And that's been really helpful for many of the council members, because our biggest challenge, only administrative challenge, really, it's not the agenda, it's not the presentation, it's about getting that quorum. And we do make phone calls, and it does take a lot of the time to just personal texts and things of that nature. But that's like the only real challenge about a meeting for us. So,
I
anyway,
say the time too, the time, like for me, it's prior to 5 o'clock, it's a toss up whether I can make it or not.
mhm.
You know, I always accept, but I never know up until, you know, about an hour before whether I can truly make it or not. So I just lucked out so far, but you never know.
So Lee, if I could just on that, and I'm glad Becky's here, because that might be a question. Becky and I are going to meet separately just about in preparing for the council meeting, that perhaps we just do just a general what time works for everybody, right? We have them in play because it worked last year, but if we're going to truly make sure that those hours, does 6 o'clock, does 5:45 need to be moved to 6? So maybe we can do a little poll of the members.
Yep, I think that'd be
Okay.
great.
Thank
And if we do something this summer, we'll have to have a sign for Frank's.
Frank's
Let us-
friend.
And they happy to help. Let's scroll down to the next one.
There's more jokes.
Oh yeah, that was just repeated because that's already up in section 1. So if we
Yes.
look at section 1, it's already there. So I think it can just be deleted. This one here under vacancies, we run into this in Plymouth all the time when somebody just disappears. And so I wanted to add some language that says that if a delegate or alternate, so if they resign, that's easy. But what happens if they just disappear and you're not able to contact or have contact with them? So again, I think we put in 90 days to say if we are unable to contact a delegate or alternate for over 90 days, and certainly there are reasons. So it doesn't say they have to attend, but if they're not in communication with the director for more than 90 days, we could then notify the town or the city that they need to have that vacancy filled. And again, there are medical reasons, there are personal reasons, there are family reasons why you might be gone. But I think that's different than going to Mary and saying, look, I need to take a leave from my position for the next 60 days versus just being gone.
Is there anything in the bylaws, maybe I'm getting ahead of myself, that says, just say if you move to another town that's outside of Plymouth County, how long in advance you have to give?
No, and
notice?
for example, I live in Bourne. I don't live in Plymouth, but I represent the town. So I think part of that is that you could have people like myself who are representing a town because of their professional capacity. That makes sense. So there's no language in there that says you have to live in the town. Or if there is, I think we do talk about that coming up.
But in my case, like I don't represent the town. So if I moved out, like in your capacity, so if I moved to like Weymouth or something like that, I'd have no connection to Plymouth County or OCPC at all.
Right. All right. And so you would assume at that point it would be your decision to resign.
Yeah.
But again, there are scenarios where people like myself represent the town because of our professional capacity.
Right.
And you might get that if you have a town administrator or a town manager who wants to attend OCPC and represent the town, but they live in another town. It's not uncommon. So let's see what we have next.
I like that language that you came up with though, Lee, because it doesn't just say you've missed meetings, it's you're not communicating.
Right.
And that's a key distinction.
Right.
I like it.
And administratively, that has, I think, been a case for us. So that would be helpful, tightening.
And then the next one I have here on the top of this next page is just consistency that delegates and alternates are capitalized everywhere else. And so this one, is this something we actually do? That was my question. Does this actually happen?
So I have one council member that has in fact done this. But
I think it's a good thing to keep. It's more just to staff to say, I don't think we should remove it, but it's a tickle to remind staff that if that's what we should be doing, then we should be doing it.
yeah. And honestly, and sorry for taking another look at it from this perspective. So the council are not members of of the personnel. You are council, you are legislative. So
Yep.
my understanding is that all council members should, as a member of the council, should be taking, you know, the conflict of interest training, though, and the code of conduct, but we don't have.
So maybe that's what you want to put in there, instead of this, just saying that you're required to do the conflict of interest filing on an annual basis, and some language about reporting to the director. What's this removal, chapter 40B of Mass General Law? Is that the right reference now that I look at that? I don't know if that's the right
Maybe
reference.
removed from the council in a matter prescribed by 40B.
Can't be, well, are you, yeah, no, I think I looked at, I think maybe the council is in 40B. I don't know. I just wonder what that reference is.
I
'Cause
did not look that up. My apologies.
Chapter 40B is the snub zoning.
Huh.
It's the
Comprehensive
regional
permit.
planning.
Maybe there's,
um,
maybe a good to put a section into that too.
It refers to regional planning.
Yeah, so it's got to be a section in there. So maybe just throw the section in that relates to it.
Okay.
All right, so any discussion about that, just deleting this language and then adding something in about the requirements for everyone to take the conflict of interest or certify. Okay. All right, next one's not mine. I'm taking a break.
Mary, this is where you had mentioned the idea of this is really more referencing like for our committees, but since it's the executive committee, should we be putting a limit to those who are interested in being on a committee? I feel like the executive committee is a little different, but I wanted to at least highlight it as.
So yes, the executive committee is different.
Do we have 5 people on the executive committee usually?
Mhm.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Chair,
Clerk,
clerk,
treasurer,
treasurer, we
And
don't have
then
a vice president.
Lee,
the chairs,
Noreen,
the chairs of the subcommittees.
Yeah, but that's not how it's written.
No.
Mm-mm.
It says the executive committee shall consist of the chair, who shall serve as the president, a vice president, who shall be the secretary of the council, and a treasurer, and such other council delegates as the president shall appoint, and the general council shall approve. So, I mean, what we would then have to change it to say, and the chairs of other committees as such as,
No,
you know,
I
as the
think
president shall appoint.
I think the way it's worded is just whomever the president chooses to appoint.
Yeah.
I think
Right,
it just
but it's like-
happens to be the chairs.
Yeah.
But the not greater than 7 nor less than 5?
I would just say, once you're over 7 members, the dynamic breaks down, and once you're below 5, that's a pretty small group. So once, if it's not 7, it would be 9, and that's a big number. So I mean, I think 7 to 5 is the ideal range for an
Yeah.
executive committee myself.
I don't think we've ever had the city of Brockton sitting on our executive committee meetings when we're
No, no.
convening, do we?
No, but Yolando, because he now is, we had a delegate, they went away. But it's almost, this is almost the same kind of the language that's for the MPO, right? That Brockton is a automatic signature because of the regulations that the MPO is. I mean,
I don't have any problem with it. I just think we're not doing it.
but again, since Yolando Spinola just became the delegate, that he is more active and he has been participating. So I think perhaps if I would recommend leaving it as is. I'm not quite sure. I think again, it was 2.5 years that I think we went without a delegate from Brockton. And Preston did not want to be the delegate. So now we have a full delegate. My recommendation would be leave it as is. Let me take some time to re-explain this. We can talk with Yolando to know his role, and that and then I think that's perhaps because Brockton is the largest community in our region, but I'm not quite sure from the history of whether that's mimicking other organizations. I just don't know.
Yeah, I think it's good to have them represented, and if there's an ability to have them more engaged, and again, in my history with the council, Brockton has not been as engaged, at least at my level, maybe at the staff level. So
Mhm.
having them on the ability to be on the executive committee could encourage their engagement. I
Mhm.
think that's a positive thing for the council.
I don't disagree.
So let's move on.
Yep.
So this again, so these are back to me. So this one is, it says right now that the executive committee shall render advice and technical assistance upon the request of member communities. I can't see how we can do that without Mary's consent. So again, making it clear that this is done through staff. So we can always say that we want to do that, but we need Mary to say, yes, that's a good use of my resources, my money, my staff. I think that's pretty obvious. And
Mhm.
the same thing goes for M, the thought that the executive committee would employ technical staff or other professionals. That's Mary's job. So again, I think those need to come out. Any comment?
I'm trying to look for the provision where we, I didn't notice this, but do we have something in here where we, appoint Mary?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah. That'll be.
Which number is that?
Let's see.
Here, the last one. W.
Oh,
And
oh, perfect. Okay,
I
thank
think we
you.
have more dialogue about it somewhere too.
I
I
believe
think so
so,
too.
in the financial, I think, area. But we're gonna get to that anyway.
All
Yeah.
right, that works.
Okay. What do we have next?
This one was from David. Possibly amending this line to read administer federal, state, and other funding for our region's aging service. This would
That makes
acknowledge
sense.
potentially.
I mean, why not add other funding?
That's fair.
other- Yeah, okay. I will. Yes,
We can get grants
Just-
from private organizations, awesome.
yeah. All right, why? This is another one from David. Since there's a push to codify continuity of operations and emergency plans. Both paragraphs, something along the lines of adding in to periodically review the organization's emergency plans to ensure good faith effort for the continuity of operations and the ability to continue rendering agency assistance to our communities.
I would not necessarily disagree with what David said. I wouldn't limit it to the Older Americans Act either. I mean, we do it as management internally. You
Well,
can-
that's what I was going to say. Isn't this more a function of staff and the director than it is a bylaw and the executive committee? I mean, I think those things are important, but I don't know if it's the executive committee that's going to be responsible for doing that more than it is staff. You tell me, Mary, though, whether you think that's something that you need to elevate to the staff, I mean, to the executive board for review.
Well,
I'm
this
actually
would be
gonna-
just review. It wouldn't be to create the plan.
Right, and Charlie, I'm looking to you because I want to remember that if it was in the federal highway, I thought it was something was mentioned in one of the certification reviews about the continuity of operation plan, what do we have for plan and,
Well,
you know,
this came up with like the Ted Zimmerman
from
from EOEA. They were asking David if the AAA had a continuity of operations plan, and they're looking for them to put one together. But this
So-
goes back to post-Hurricane Katrina when the federal government directed all federal agencies to have a continuity of operations plan. And then that permeated through state agencies in Massachusetts for MassDOT and all the regional transit authorities and the like.
So for me, I'm fine with it. It's more, Mary, where you think it belongs in the bylaws or whether it belongs in something with policies and procedures of the
I would
council.
I would almost venture to say just because it's what Charlie had just mentioned, did bring back, because I was following some of the emails, to see this could strengthen, that it's not just internal, that this is the
Okay.
council has embraced it. So I would, let's leave that in.
And let's just make
Should-
sure we look at the language so it's consistent, so it's not the only one that's 6 paragraphs or 6 sentences long and we have
Correct.
more bulleted.
Charlie,
Oh,
Charlie,
go ahead, Charlie.
Oh, just jumping back up, if you're striking out M to employ technical staff, how about the one right below it to retain consultants?
Yeah, yep, good
Does
point.
that come out as well?
Yep. It's not something we ever do. Good point, Charlie.
Mary, do you think that this
Wait, did we
language, the one that
select the
David,
auditor? Is that in here? I didn't think about that.
we did not, the audit, there's nothing in the council about auditing services that we have that under our finance, overall finance, committee's purview.
I can't remember. Does the auditor get selected by the finance committee or by the full council?
It's, because we put out a bid and it's over 10,000. So it is a committee of staff and council members that review and then make recommendations to the finance, and the council approves.
so that would go under L, keeping it general.
It could.
Oh, wait, to authorize not to exceed $10,000.
Yeah, we really don't authorize purchase of equipment, supplies, and services under 10,000. We would leave that to the executive director usually.
Isn't it usually over?
But auditing services, we were about 45 grand a year. So
Right. So maybe L should say to authorize purchase of equipment, service, supplies, and services exceeding $10,000 instead of not to exceed.
That's
What Megan was saying, right?
what I thought it said until I reread it, so
Yeah.
I would assume that exceeding would make more sense. Anyone else before I
Nope,
make a
yep.
note? Exceeding.
I was just looking at what the audit committee says, and it says the finance audit committee shall meet as necessary. At the call of the chair, it is the function of the committee to oversee all council financial matters and report their findings to and recommendations. Well, that doesn't say anything about the annual audit though.
no, but it's duties, right? Remember, this was one of the discussions on that point that John Costa raised in terms of thinking we needed to have a separate audit committee. My challenge from administrative is finding enough people to serve on these committees has been the
Yep.
challenge, so we've kept it combined.
So, but maybe to Becky's point, we have another bullet here that says to review the annual audit.
I
And
would be,
again, maybe that doesn't belong here because this is the executive committee, correct? So that
Mhm.
might be something that needs to go under the general powers of the overall
council.
general counsel,
Mhm,
that we add a bullet under for the
Mhm.
general counsel that says
mhm.
review the annual audit. Yeah, so under section 1.
This
put
one, right?
something-
Here we
Yep.
go.
Yeah, so put something in there about the annual audit. Becky, you're making me go back to page 1. That's not how I operate.
Should the one that David suggested, should that go under primary policy or should that be under executive?
Good question. I think it could go under the general counsel. I mean, it gets into a little bit of the weeds, but
Anyone have a
I'll
preference?
leave it to your discretion. You want to think about, I think where we're going to head with this now, because we have 2 or 3 that we haven't quite totally fleshed out, that maybe you have an internal discussion, put it where you think it's appropriate, send it back out to us. And again, to
Yep.
the same thing, which is
okay.
we're generally okay with it. We'll
Mhm.
look at it. If any one of us has a concern, we'll call another meeting to discuss
Okay.
it. But I think that probably makes the most sense
Thank you.
if there's no objection from the committee. All right. All right, now we're down to the word term. Is that you just added the word term?
No, that one was, this was my own, just because we've talked about it a few times about the terms, but I know that it's been a little wonky, like with. I've noticed that our treasurer, we've basically changed it every year. And I know that we're kind of going with the terms, but I don't know. I feel like it was just kind of we were getting into the weeds when we were trying to figure out the terms of all of the president, vice president and treasurer.
Yeah, the only
And
thing I
it-
could, yeah. Yeah,
And
the
it's
only
just
thing I
kind of getting us put into a
The last time we
confusing
did
hole.
this, I think we spent 3 hours on it, and
Mhm.
yeah, I don't know. I
We
mean,
I just
unless you
wasn't sure
think
if we
you,
just take it out and we just put a maximum instead of like 3 consecutive terms, it's just no more than a certain amount of years.
Well, I think though that if you have it down as 2 years and 3 years, then you know, if we don't do elections, you don't,
So can I weigh in on this? Because I believe what has, again, this has happened under the 5 years that I've been here. The idea was to have the terms, having them be rotated. So one is coming off. What our challenge is again is people stepping up to be the president, vice president, and treasurer. There was internal discussions, not just with staff, but with some of the members of the executive committee, that having members serve a 1-year term was much more palatable for people who have busy lives. So if at least they'll feel less concerned saying, oh gosh, I've got 2 more years and I've got a life full and I don't want to leave the organization in a lurch. So that had been the discussion. I do feel, and just for those around, I'm looking at Frank and Stephen and Becky and you, Lee, right? This is a group that's always showing up. And from my perspective, I think there is some continuity of the organization that because of these terms might be limiting. While I understand the need to have them be where one is not being ended altogether, because that becomes even more of a challenge. So
so did you want 1 year and 2 years?
I
I
know
was just
that's-
thinking more, sorry, it was when I put it in, it was more of like administrative wise, like I just know whenever we do the annual meetings, we're like, what term are you? What, like, and then if somebody comes in later, I know that technically it's saying that they're filling in for somebody else's term and it's getting into different circles. And I'm just wondering if it was more of just, again, in my opinion, an administrative kind of protection per se, of just in case we lose track of anything. Because I mean, also there's nothing that stops the president from stepping down the same time as the treasurer, because the treasurer can only do a 2-year term. And then I mean, I'm indifferent. It was just more of, I just know we've had these conversations. So that's the only reason why I brought it up.
I think we should have a term, whatever it is. I don't have strong feelings about. I do get the idea that it may be difficult to recruit people if they feel it's going to be too long. But I do think for sort of, I guess I've never written any sort of bylaws or anything that didn't have a term in there for the main officers. So I feel like I would need to think long and hard about taking out terms altogether.
I agree.
So, but if we went back to 1 year instead of 2 years and 3 years, if we went 1 year and 2 years, then I think the 3 consecutive terms might need to be 4 consecutive terms, because you don't necessarily want to force people out if you're having difficulty recruiting people.
and again, maybe what we do is Mary, and you can look at this and monitor it, and maybe this is something the next time we revisit, come back again and say, let's leave it like this for now, in my opinion, and then come back and revisit it if we think something's not working.
I would agree. And a lot of this is a communication that I have with Becky, that Becky has with certainly with now Christine coming back on. So it's the success of the terms that are there are the good communication amongst ourselves. So we'll leave it as is.
Perfect.
All right, so the next one was just, sometimes we move it around, so I just thought it would be more flexible to just say at the annual meeting. Okay. Oh, and we've talked about how the vice president also serves as secretary. So I just wanted to codify that.
That's correct. We changed that, I think, the last time, correct?
Yeah.
We at least
I just-
talked about it.
Yeah.
And if it wasn't in there, thank you for adding that in there.
Yeah, and then the very last one at the bottom of that, what happens if both the president and vice president are not available? So I just figured we'd have a third in line that the treasurer will preside, make it clear what that chain of command is.
Good.
And it's not Al Haig for older people who remember. Okay, what's next?
Okay,
Planning committees. This is where we talked about having a oh, this was actually Lee, I think you talked about this during one of the past meetings about quorums with our committees, like our subcommittees. And figuring that out.
What about it?
I don't remember what meeting it was, but there was one where we didn't have a quorum. And I remember
Mhm.
you bringing up saying we should talk about it during the next bylaws meeting about if we need quorums during the subcommittees, because I mean, really, we're just passing it on as a advisement to the council to vote on. And then that stops us from having to, like Mary said, contact everyone constantly for every small subcommittee. But I
Well-
just know that was brought up, so.
So you can always meet without a quorum. The issue is you can't meet
Vote.
with a quorum without following open meeting laws. But any two of us could get together and talk about the bylaws without violating, well, unless the bylaw review committee is only 3 people, in which case 2 people couldn't talk without being in a committee meeting. But in general, you can meet without a quorum. It's just it's just you can't take action without a quorum, right?
Yeah.
So for
Yeah,
something like
and you can certainly report to say, we did not have the quorum, but those present make the following recommendation.
good, okay.
Yeah.
I think that statement that you just made was what we were having some struggles with. You know, didn't want to waste those who took the time to show up to the meeting. We know that some discussion's necessary in order for us to get it to the council. So to your point, reporting to the full council and then noting that we did not have a full, but here's the
And I
recommendation. Mhm.
certainly wouldn't want to have language in here that says you can do stuff without a quorum, because that's counter to the whole
Open-
governmental system of America.
Yeah.
Mhm.
I don't-
it's interesting though, like if we have in B, which is kind of interesting because it includes 2 committees, but it have in B that the general counsel can take no action without the recommendation of the personnel committee and the finance audit committee. So those recommendations would have to be at a meeting with a quorum of the committee.
Mhm.
Correct.
And those
And again, it's probably the way it should be.
I was gonna say, there were specifically why we have the personnel committee to review the bylaws and then merit increases, right? Those,
I feel like bylaws and personnel are usually the one, well, and the finance audit are the ones that are the most important for a quorum.
Okay, when I saw this, I was a little confused as to why E is there because we have A as the bylaws
Oh,
committee.
nope, that's just me being dumb and writing the wrong thing.
Oh, okay, because the note is more
Sorry.
about DEI. Okay.
Yeah, no, sorry.
All right, so if
First
we
of
can
all-
go back up, I think we clarified we're okay with that one comment. The second comment you have there, the executive committee has its own section, so I don't think we need to mention it there. Because
Mhm.
this is like, we have the general committee, then we have the executive committee, and these are the others. So I don't believe myself that we should have the executive committee mentioned here, because it's already in
Yeah.
its own section. All right, and what else do we have? The committee shall meet as necessary on the Finance and Audit Committee, Legislative Committee. This committee shall meet no less than twice a year.
This was already in here. I think I only highlighted it just because the other ones didn't really have
Yeah,
many
those. And then it's like, I think we're definitely going to meet more than twice a year, but it might set us up for technically being out of compliance.
yeah. I mean, why not for consistency, unless there's an objection from a committee member, just use the same as necessary language that's in the other ones.
Okay.
Subcommittee shall meet as necessary.
And maybe we no longer call it a new subcommittee.
Yeah.
Yes, I saw.
Sounds good.
Yes, thank you for
Mhm.
yeah.
Yeah, it's probably, you're right. Becky, that language probably comes from 1972.
It actually, there was no legislative committee prior to me coming on board.
Oh,
So
okay.
Mm.
it is,
Well, at some
it is
point, well, it's
relatively
like,
new, but I'm no longer.
So
Whenever
now
I'm-
it'll just say shall meet as necessary.
Yes.
Yep.
Yes.
as whenever I do a presentation on something in North Plymouth and I talk about the new Route 44 and I realize it's probably 20 years old now.
So, to establish and I would spell out instead of.
Yes, I was sorry. I'm just doing short.
Yeah, and I think we
Thanks.
need to see that language. And again, that will be a good example of one that if we all look at it, we're okay with it.
Yep.
Then we just say that we're okay with it based on today's meeting. If any one of us wants to review it and discuss it, unless there's just something cosmetic, I'll leave that to you, Mary. But then I think what we'd say is we're okay with this, but let's see the final language. And if anybody has a concern, we'll call a new meeting.
And if you have cosmetic or those kind of comments, send them back to the whatever staff are on the email. Don't include our fellow council members to avoid open meeting law issues.
Yeah.
Agreed. And I just want to appreciate what Megan's doing. She's live editing, and this is really helpful for us to track a lot of the times over the past year. We'd have, like I said, we'd have to go through the whole recording all over again.
Yeah.
So, we will spell this, I think at one point when it was established, Lee, you had, you were leaving it to myself to really define. Now that we have a chair, it is Yolando. He is working very actively with us, and we will form this, not necessarily with him in mind, but obviously the role that he plays as a person of color who is able to, who's engaged in helping us define this. So this will be helpful.
Good. All right, moving on. So it does look like, yeah, we should probably change that to annual. I missed that one instead of April.
Was that a haha, Megan?
Mm.
That was with a respectful haha.
Very respectful.
So what did this look like beforehand? I'm trying, because this seems to make complete sense the way it's worded, but I'm not sure what was
Yeah.
there before.
I'm not sure.
This, you.
I must have deleted something without keeping it.
Did I?
Shall
Or-
create-
The other non-standing as may be necessary be such that we. Well, it looks good.
Yep. All right, next.
This is where we talked about removing limits to
Hmm.
a subcommittee.
I still think that makes sense. No less than 3 and no more than 7.
Yep. That's good.
Megan, what do you have in there for the comment?
Remove setting a limit to
Oh, yeah.
committees.
Okay, all right.
Yeah, I don't
Because I
think
think
so.
anyone can still come.
Yep. Yep. Okay, what do we have next?
Nothing
CPC's
They-
here.
never had an
nothing?
issue where we don't have unanimity.
Nothing here. Nothing here. This is a future thought from David. The council and agency should longer term look at the bylaws articulation of the paragraph in Article 8 bank account deals with the area agency on aging volunteers transportation account.
Hmm.
Primary purpose of protecting the integrity of donated funds for the purpose of assisting with aging older adult transportation services must of course be maintained.
Can you keep scrolling down on that, Megan? Because I
Having known David for over 30 years, he's never at a loss for words.
Mhm.
So,
Yeah, it
I-
might be helpful too, that instead of, figuring out if he has specific wordings he's suggesting,
I'll
because this is
work,
more of a commentary.
I'll work
Right.
with him in terms of, because he says for longer term, but if there's something we need to address it, let's address it. But I know for a fact, like when the volunteer transportation program, it is held in a special account, like we can't touch it, like it's deposited and used for that very purpose. So let me get to the bottom of what.
And it's
so-
only for volunteer. We can't use it for like Ubers and things for actual rides.
I think that's where he put something in here. OCPC had to broaden our grant funding standards to include funding for alternative
Okay.
transportation such as ride sharing and other technological transportation modes of assistance.
So
So I think
Mary,
that's where he's coming in, is to become more
Mhm.
from an account.
Oh, is that
design-
so Mary, this is a good one for a future agenda item. So it
Yep.
does say for future action. So maybe you can work with Dave and get
Mhm.
some actually language to look at, and we'll put it on for the next agenda.
Will do. Or Mr. Chair, this could also be taken up under the Finance Committee if need be, if it's something that they find that it's that could be reviewed. So, okay.
I only put this, we put the minutes typically on the council section. So I just wasn't sure if we should update this.
Yeah,
It says it's in the
that's-
webs of the
I think it's
calendar.
great. I think it's great. Shows accessibility.
Okay, so I'll just update.
Yeah, and then the last one is mine, if we can scroll down. So this, we never ever have followed Robert's rules, and knowing Robert's rules, it's a horrible rabbit hole to go down and it can get ugly. So I pulled this, I saw this, I thought this was great language. So basically what I just said, when conducting meetings, the council shall follow generally accepted parliamentary procedures. And then I put some basic procedures in there and it says basic procedures to be generally followed by the council. So we have latitude, but it just gives some general language where we can talk about how we perform it. And it's really a quorum present, full members, free discussions, only one person talks, a motion's made, seconded, chair states the motion. So again, it was just very general language.
This is helpful because I think one of our biggest challenges that we have is whether a member who did not attend a previous meeting, but they've read the minutes, think that they can't and they need to abstain. But because of Robert's rules, I think that because of Robert's rules, but as you just mentioned, we don't follow Robert's rules, but
And actually the meeting law provisions in Massachusetts, I think it's the open meeting law provisions, but it may be something else, specifically says that you can vote without attending a meeting, because otherwise boards and commissions end up without enough people being able to approve minutes sometimes. So
Right.
especially when there's a changeover.
Right.
Let me say something to you, Madam Director. As the town moderator, I have ruled many times that parliamentary procedure holds true more than Robert's rules. Because if you say Robert's rules, there is no budgetary priorities in Robert's rules. So it's by what you want to make it. And like Lee said, he's done the right thing by giving you so many options of what you can take. So I think, Lee, that's terrific the way you did that.
Okay. So that brings us to the end.
Can I only make one minor change to this? I think
Sure.
it's great because I don't think we follow Robert's rules. I think most of us don't even remember which is Robert's rules and which is just good practice. When you have the quorum language up here, if you go
Okay.
up just a
Yeah.
little bit,
Yeah.
I think we should say a quorum must be present for the group to act,
Yes.
but not to have a discussion
Mm-hmm.
or something. Because I'm thinking that these parliamentary procedures can be also used by new chairs as a guideline.
Yep.
And what I would recommend, both to you, Mr. Chair, and President Coletta, and parliamentarian Frank, is that when we do the retreat, and perhaps even before then, that we even do some training about active participation in terms of the steps that you outlined.
And just on the fly here, so I don't like the wording the way it is. It might be discussions, maybe the discussion piece goes as the main thing, that the discussions can occur, but a quorum must be present to act. It just kind of flipping it around. It
Yeah.
just seems a little awkward. And again, we
Yeah.
just did that on the fly, but maybe we just flip that around where we talk about discussions can occur or discussion occurs, but a quorum must be present to act.
The discussion occurs either way, you know.
Yeah, just, discussion occurs and then, but a quorum is needed to act.
Actually, the only other thing, Lee, I'm sorry, while it comes up is then the procedure for consent agenda. And we can add that to the list, just what a consent agenda. But we can add that in.
Yeah, okay. Any other discussions on these wonderful changes?
No, I'm sort of curious where you got these rules from, though.
The Google.
The Google machine.
Yeah, I looked at a bunch of stuff on the Google,
Hmm.
and this one I found, and I've actually done this a lot for my own work too. Aww.
Hmm.
I've done this a lot of work with my for here in Plymouth, and I've had several examples, and I just thought this was a really good one. Nice, simple, easy, without getting into all kinds of minutia. So with that, is there a motion to recommend these subject to the review we discussed?
Yeah, I would move that we recommend adoption of the revised bylaws along the lines discussed, subject to final review via email of the changes.
Do we have a second?
I will second that.
Okay, any other discussion? So Frank,
No,
all right, Becky,
Yes.
and Steve,
Yes.
and Lee Hartman, yes, so it's unanimous.
Thank you, everybody.
They call me Speedy for a reason. I always say I have spent my lifetime on the other side of the gavel. You give it to me, and I will be efficient.
Lee, thank you for those recommendations. I know when we saw them come through, it was really helpful, and to the members, thank you. We will get our responses back to you very quickly so they can be ready for council approval without hesitation. So thank you.
All right.
Thanks, everybody.
You need a motion.
Okay.
Motion to
Motion to-
adjourn?
It's by consensus. So adjourned.
I.
Aye.
Thank you, everyone.
All right.
Thank you.